Hey guys, this is Denise from loomhat.com. In today's video, I want to talk to you about loom knitting with 2 strands of yarn. Okay, most loom knitters use commercial brands like the Nifty Knitter. In fact, this is Amazon's bestseller. It's the brand that the average knitter knows, loom knitter. And it is usually the base that's used for creating other looms, like Michael's generic brand, the store brand, Darcy. Most of them followed this size, and the gauge, which is the space between one peg and the other. And in most of these looms, this gauge is pretty big, and it doesn't do well with the type of yarn most of us use, which is a medium 4 worsted weight yarn. So when you knit using this 1 strand of yarn on a Nifty Knitter, you use the regular E-wrap, right? If you're making a hat, you're gonna come up with this issue where you find holes in your hat and you wonder what happened, because you followed the pattern and you followed the instructions and now you have these big holes. So let me show you what that looks like when you do that. Here's a little knitting that I did, and this is using this Nifty Knitter and 1 strand of worsted weight yarn. And if this was a hat, when I put my hat on, what would normally happen is I would stretch out the knitting and I would find these holes. And depending on what kind of hat you're doing, I mean, in some cases, if you're doing a slouchy and it's like a spring hat and you want these openings in your hat, then hey, great, you got what you wanted. But if that wasn't your intent, you're not a happy camper. So there's a way to keep this from happening using this this worsted weight yarn and your Nifty Knitter. And how do you resolve that? Well, you resolve that by using 2 strands of yarn when you knit. Now when you put your hat on, you don't have those holes. See that? You have a thicker knitting, and I purposely started knitting this with the same color yarn because I didn't want you to think that it was sort of like a illusion because you were looking at 2 colors, that it seemed different. Here's your 1 strand and there's your 2 strands. I've done exactly the same thing. I didn't do anything different here than I did here. All I did was that I added another strand of yarn to my knitting, and now the effect is totally different. Okay, you can even see it on this side, which is where you see the basic knitting stitch, right? You see that. I'm a big fan of this, especially if I'm using an E-wrap. Why? Because if you can see here, you have a not just more open space, but a more narrow knitting. You can tell exactly where I started to use that 2nd strand. You can easily see that this is where it happened, right here. So not only are you getting a nicer, tighter knit, you're getting a thicker knit, you're getting a stronger knit, and my favorite part about doing this, you're gonna finish quicker. Okay, so how do you do that? Let me show you. Okay, so among your options is just to take 2 balls of yarn or any 2 sources of yarn and bring your yarn together. You do your slip knot, and you basically are using these 2 strands as though they were 1. So you're putting them on your loom as though they were 1. And you go about your business following whatever that pattern is telling you to do with 2 yarns, understanding that when it says you need 2, you really need 4, because everything's going to be doubled, right? So there's that clear understanding that this is 1 and this is 2 in your particular case, because you're using 2 strands as 1. Okay, so that's your easiest option, to just take 2 sources, whether it's 2 balls or 2 scans, whatever however you pronounce it, your 2 sources of yarn. Okay, so that was one way of doing it, and I wanted to show you another. In some cases you have 1 source, right? You have 1, and you don't want to go through the trouble of, you know, unraveling this and making another ball of yarn, because that's not your thing. And I totally can relate, because I just don't wanna, so I don't. And so I'll use 1 skein of yarn, and the way I do that is that there's always one that's loose, right? And usually you'll find that either wrapped right at the front of it under the label, or you pull it from here and then the yarn's really coming from the middle, right? That's one way. That's one strand. That's how you get it, and that's the normal way. That's what they're expecting you to do. But you wanted to use 2 strands, so where do you go get the other one? You go get the other one on the other end from in here, and you pull your yarn from there. See? And so you take 1 strand from here and the other strand that they supplied you on the outside, and you bring them together. Okay, sounds good. What's the issue with this? Because there is an issue when you do this, and that is that sometimes midway through your project you're going to get like a big ball that's going to come out from the inside, and it doesn't look good like this one. This one looks fabulous. Some of them you'll get a big ball that's all knotted, and it's just, well, a mess. It looks like somebody's really bad hair day. And so if that's the case, what you're going to need to do, because you don't want to stop your project, is that you're going to need to cut that yarn, right? You're going to need to say, I can't unravel this right now, or I'm going to pull it out later, but I got to detangle it. And you can't detangle it because your project is on the other side of this yarn. So what you're going to have to do is just cut the yarn, right? Cut it so that you're freeing it. You're freeing the yarn from your project. You're going to cut it, click, and then you're going to do your untangling and all your craziness, and you might have to create a ball, even though that was what you were trying to avoid. And then you just make a slip knot and put that 1 yarn back on your knitting where you left off. And I don't know if you can follow me there. So you have 1, right? You had 2. You had 2. You were working with 2. And then you had to cut 1 off. So now you're left with 2 on this last one, and this peg only has 1. All you're going to do is make a slip knot on this one after you unravel it and you fix your situation. Make a slip knot and put it here on the next peg that you wanted to work on, and then just grab the other yarn. You're gonna tie this one to the one before, and then you just go on with your 2 strands of yarn as if nothing happened. Okay, so that's the only problem with making 1 skein of yarn your source for your 2 strands of yarn. You have to keep that in mind, that sometimes what comes out of here is scary, ugly, and you're gonna have to deal with it sometimes midway through your job, through your project. So your other option is to just, hey, get its cousin and pull your yarn from your regular source on the side. I'll be honest with you, most of the time I just pull my yarn from here, and I deal with the little monster that comes out on occasion as the problem comes around. Sometimes I'm completely finished with my project before that issue happens. So like I said, many times you'll get this really nice, I don't know, glob of yarn that you can work with. And then sometimes you're going to get that ugly monster. Okay, well, I hope this helped you to understand how to do your loom knitting with 2 strands. If you need me to explain a little further, I will do that. Just let me know at the bottom on your comments. In the meantime, I'm going to do just one bit of knitting on the loom so you could see this concept in action, as they say. Okay, so here comes my oh my, what is this called? My slip knot. Okay, and then I'm basically okay, so as you can see, I am working with 2 strands of yarn as one. Okay, now I'm going to do this as if I was doing a flat knit. Okay, and I just, it's no different to knit with 2 strands of yarn as one than it is to knit with just 1 strand of yarn. Okay, and I do want to show you that sometimes it's okay. Here is I was making some leg warmers with this particular stitch. It is a garter stitch. It was done with just 1 strand of yarn, and it worked fine, and it works well. This is worsted weight yarn, no problem. Okay, so you don't always have to use 2 strands of yarn. This was made on a nifty knitter. Sometimes you only need 1 strand. But if you're going to E-wrap, you're going to use a nifty knitter, and you're going to use worsted weight, by all means, I would suggest use knit with 2 strands of yarn as one. And until the next project, you guys have a great day. Ciao.